The top performing meta decks on Untapped to my own personal brews that I've been finding the most success with. Let's go ahead and dive on into my best decks roundup for Marvel Snap. We kick off my Jeff's picks this week with a low curve control deck featuring our latest card release in Speed alongside Titania and Hood's Demon as its primary stat sticks. This deck looks to win games with low overall point totals thanks to cards like White Widow, Viper, Green Goblin, Debris, and even Titania happily hopping across the board to clog up your opponent's side. One play pattern to watch out for with this deck is if your opponent has only 2 spots open in a lane, you can play Titania along with a clutter card behind her, and then if your opponent plays nothing into that lane, both of them will happily hop across, and then on the last turn of the game, you can pull Titania back, effectively causing a 10-point swing in that lane. This deck list also gets to play Goose as an effectively one-sided effect, as an efficient way to lock bigger plays out of a second lane after you've cluttered up a first. Now, I will say that while Speed felt pretty reasonable in this shell because we're good at spending all of our energy every turn, I definitely don't think that he's necessary. I think other 3 energy stat sticks like Sage, Gladiator, or even Cassandra Nova could all be reasonable options if you like to look at this and didn't invest in Marvel Snap's latest card release. My second Jeff's pick this week is an oldie but a goodie in Lockjaw Thors. I added an additional Infinite Conquest ticket to my account with this deck list this week, and it's a ton of fun. Lockjaw getting buffed back to letting you swap out multiple cards per turn feels incredibly powerful when Jane Foster is fishing up wasps and hammers in those final moments of the game. You'll often have just 1 or 2 cards in your deck, so you can pretty deterministically know what you're going to be getting out of the dog, even rotate back through those same hammers or Doctor Dooms that you're playing into that path that turn. As far as must-have higher series cards in this deck list, I think Beta Ray Bill is the only one that's important for power level and consistency. Nico Minaru and Spider-Ham can be substituted for other cheap cards you can play into Lockjaw late, such as Iceman, and Red Hulk can be any generically big 6 energy card, such as Regular Hulk or even Giganto. I'd like to take a quick minute to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Metafy. Metafy has added a brand new part to their platform that allows you to support creators like myself directly, with 100% of the money that you support with going directly to the creator that you're supporting. If you're someone who enjoys the content that I make here for Marvel Snap and you want to help this continue to be able to be my full-time job, consider supporting me directly. If you're in the position to even support with $1 per month, that's more direct support than I would get if you watched every single advert on every single YouTube video and Twitch stream that I did in a 30-day period. If you're someone who's in a position to support a little bit more than that at the $4 tier and above, you also gain access to my exclusive supporter-only Discord server where myself and the community are chatting about Marvel Snap and video games and sports and politics and food and all sorts of other things 24 hours a day. So if you're interested in picking my brain even during offline hours, that's an excellent way to do it. Shout out again to Metafy for only creating this awesome platform for people to be able to support on, but also sponsoring this video today to promote it extra to you all at home. Now, let's go ahead and get back to the deck list, shall we? My last Jeff's pick this week is an incredibly sweet Dakin discard combo deck. What this deck is looking to do is relatively straightforward. You play out Dakin, you use Arnim Zola to copy Dakin to the 2 other locations, ending you with 3 Maramasa shards in hand, and then you either play out those shards and Killmonger them, or use MODOK to bin them all, doubling up your 2 Dakins, not just once, not just twice, but thrice, giving them a grand total of 32 power. This deck list can execute this combo in a couple different ways. The first is by magic, giving us 7 turns in the game. We can also utilize Ravonna Renslayer to make Arnim Zola cost 5. And finally, thanks to Supergiant, we could play MODOK face down on turn 5, spread those Dakins across the board on turn 6 with Zola, and then have the MODOK flip up after the fact, blowing our hand away. This deck list has some backup plans as well. Dracula is another card that we can copy into 2 locations, which when paired with a big Apocalypse in our hand can give us large stat lines as well. As far as must-have higher series cards go in this deck list, obviously Dakin and MODOK are not replaceable. Supergiant can be substituted for Invisible Woman to give us a similar Hydra MODOK effect, and Grandmaster can be substituted for your favorite other discard enabler to kind of just fill in the gaps when your combo doesn't come together. Our first high potential deck list this week is also the best performing speed deck per Untapped metrics. It is the Thena, Angela, Kitty Pryde, Hope Summers, Elsa Bloodstone, Little Growers package, complemented with Mysterio, Kate Bishop, Mockingbird, and Sasquatch at the top end of the curve as another way to get big stats into play. This is just a deck list that, outside of turn 1, which is obviously only Kitty Pryde, has a ton of ways to utilize its energy every single turns 2 through 6. So speed is pretty consistently just a 3-7 to 3-8 here without any special consideration. Similar to basically every deck playing speed, though, if he's missing in your collection, I think you could easily substitute him out here for other just generically good 3 energy card. Unfortunately, most of the other higher series cards in this deck are not replaceable. They fill pretty unique roles, with my estimation being Nocturne and Gwenpool being the ones that you could maybe swap around for other cards on curve the most without losing too much function that the deck has at its base. Our next high potential deck list this week is another Kitty, Thena, Angela variation featuring last week's newest card release in Wiccan. This deck list, without doing anything cute and gimmicky like Quicksilver or Domino, looks to just play a good curve of cards on turns 1, 2, and 3, so it can activate Wiccan on turn 4 relatively consistently, allowing it to unlock bigger plays like Claw, Doctor Doom, and Alioth, while still playing out Kitty Pryde in those final moments of the game. One question that comes into my mind when looking at this deck list is Wiccan better than playing something like Hope Summers, which could provide perhaps a little bit more consistent energy ramp, or maybe in addition to, so you just have more than one way to slam your big 6-drop bombs ahead of curve or alongside your Kitty Pryde as the last turn's wrapping up. Outside of the Kitty Thena package, a lot of the bits in this deck are likely interchangeable so long as you keep the energy costs of your card the same, because remember, it's going to be important that you play cards on turns 1, 2, and 3 so Wiccan can get his effect activated, but things like Alioth, the top end of the curve example, could easily be substituted for other big 6 energy plays such as Magneto or Red Hulk. Our next high potential deck list features Man-Thing, who was buffed in our over-the-air update last week up to 7 base power, meaning he can provide up to a 15-point stat swing when you play it out, which is especially good on the last turn of the game when your opponent's not going to be expecting it. This deck list is also leveraging Wiccan, but it is worth noting that with only 3 1-energy cards and 2 energy cards, it's definitely going to be less consistent at activating him and is more focused on just playing a low curve of individually good cards. Because this deck's going to be playing its hand out pretty consistently, Gwenpool is an excellent candidate for another way to give you lots of stats, which you can often hold in your hand until that final moment of the game. Imagine it's turn 6 and you're slamming down a 9-point Man-Thing from Gwenpool in one lane for 17 points, and you've got a 7 or even 9-point Hydra Bob to play somewhere else. That's going to be a lot of numbers that your opponent's rarely going to be expecting. Moving into our top performing category this week, we have an Ajax Werewolf by Night Clutter Bounce amalgamation showing up in the metrics again. This deck list has a few different bits going on. First off, we've got a small clutter package, White Widow, Viper, and the Toxic Arrow from Kate Bishop, and then we have Werewolf by Night as well as Ajax to slam down big stats in those final moments of the game. One of the ways this deck list really excels is that its stat sticks are pretty resilient to Shang-Chi, because if you properly manage to not have priority going into the last turn, your Ajax is going to be 7, 8, or 9 before your Hazmat hits the board and often cranks it up well into the double digits. Similarly, Werewolf by Night is a card that you can choose to hold under that Shang-Chi threshold until you bounce it around like mad on that last turn of the game. Our next top performer is an upgrade from the high potential category last week, and a Nihilist Circe deck. This deck list has continued to put up good metrics as its sample size has grown on Untapped. I think the reason is relatively straightforward. You've got a variety of ways with Sentry, Annihilus, and Mockingbird to put big numbers into play, but you're also not short on interactive bits with things like Shadow King and Killmonger, letting you blow away the sandcastle that your opponents have worked very hard to set up over the course of the game. As far as replaceable cards go, White Widow and Copycat are just generically good 2 and 3 energy cards that you could sub out for other things that you like that fill similar spots on your curve. Circe's primary role is to clear things like Sentry's Void or the Hood's Body off the board, so something like Viper, Carnage, or even Lady Deathstrike could fill a similar spot if Circe is missing in your collection. Up next, Sandman Ultron continues to be a top performer for another week. The only noteworthy change this time around is that the most popular and top performing variations have dropped Marvel Boy in favor of other cheaper cards that add stats to the board. Our last top performer this week is Silver Surfer, the deck list remaining exactly the same as last, having solidified pretty well since Gwenpool's addition last month. Moving into our most popular category, Aeroshim remains number one with a bullet per all of the untapped metrics, actually gaining metagame share on the tracker site compared to our roundup last week. The deck lists don't really have any noteworthy changes, largely being an amalgamation of tech cards, Loki, Mockingbird, and Blob. Zoodex come in at number 2 in terms of popularity while also putting up solid performance. Just a great, honest way to make numbers while also protecting your best threats from interaction on the back of Kyera. Destroy rounds out our most popular category yet again with absolutely no changes. A fantastic choice for people that love blowing up their own stuff yet again. Last but not least, I wanted to bring back my best in class category this week for all of y'all knocking out those alliance missions at home. Bounce Move is the best performing movement deck on Untapped that's going to consistently move 7 or more cards over the course of the game while still winning as much as a move deck possibly can while we patiently wait for much needed upgrades coming in September's season. This is probably one of the most stable Marvel Snaps formats have ever been, with a lot of things looking pretty similar between last week and this week. While I'm definitely having fun brewing with a number of things, I wouldn't shed any tears if they adjusted both Aeroshim and Loki in next week's Over There update. While I don't think either of those cards are problematic in terms of the strict power level sense, the gameplay that they generate is just not something that I personally am finding enjoyable anymore. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on the current format in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed my roundup this week, be sure to smash that like button. Also, shout out again to Metafy for sponsoring today's video. Remember, if you want a fantastic way to support my content directly with as much as possible going to me, check out my link in the video description down below.